Here is something that stops most people cold the first time they hear it. Nearly half of all Americans over the age of 50 are not meeting their daily protein requirements. Not because they're starving, not because they're eating poorly by most measures, but because the amount of protein the body needs quietly increases with age. And almost nobody tells you that. Your doctor probably did not mention it at your last checkup. The label on your cereal box certainly did not. And yet right now, your body may be sending you signals, clear, recognizable signals that it is running low on one of the most essential building materials it has. That is what this video is about. Today, we are going to walk through 9 early signs that your body may be asking for more protein. And I will tell you this right now. Some of these signs are things you have probably already noticed. You just did not know what they were pointing to. By the time we get to sign number 9, you may be genuinely surprised because that one is the sign that most men over 60 assume is just normal aging. It is not. And understanding that one thing could make a real difference in how you feel every single day. Stay with me because this one is worth your full attention. Welcome back to Longevity Insight. This channel exists for one reason: to bring you practical, science-based information about living better as you age. Not trends, not hype, just what the research actually says, explained in a way that is useful in your real life. If you are not yet subscribed, now is the time to hit that button and join this community. We put out new content every week, and the people here are actively choosing to take their health seriously. You belong here. Subscribe, and let's get into it. Before we go through each sign, I want to give you a little context because it changes how you hear everything else. Protein is not a fitness buzzword. It is not something only bodybuilders need to think about. Protein is in every single cell in your body. It builds and repairs muscle tissue. It produces the enzymes that drive your metabolism. It creates the antibodies that protect your immune system. It supports your skin, your hair, your nails, and your bones. It is involved in how well you sleep and how stable your mood is. In other words, protein is not optional. It is foundational. And here is the part most people do not know. The standard recommended daily allowance for protein was set for average, sedentary young adults. That number is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. For a 165-pound man, that comes to about 60 grams a day. But research from Harvard, from Stanford's lifestyle medicine program, and from nutrition scientists around the world has made it increasingly clear that for adults over 60, that number is simply not enough. The current science points to somewhere between 1.0 and 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight as a more appropriate target for older adults, and for those who are active, possibly higher. For that same 165-pound man, that means somewhere between 75 and 90 grams per day. A 2025 survey by the International Food Information Council found that nearly 71% of Americans are trying to increase their protein intake. But awareness of the goal does not automatically translate into hitting it, especially for older adults who have eating habits built over decades, smaller appetites, and changing metabolisms. And all the while, the body keeps sending messages. Here are 9 of those messages. The first sign is persistent fatigue that sleep does not seem to fix. This is one of the most common complaints among men in their 60s and 70s, and it is almost always attributed to getting older. You sleep 7 or 8 hours, you wake up, and you still feel tired. Your energy fades by mid-morning. Tasks that used to feel straightforward feel like more effort than they should. You chalk it up to age, maybe to not sleeping as well as you used to, maybe to some vague sense that this is just how things are now. But here is what the research tells us. Protein plays a direct role in energy production. It supports the creation of enzymes responsible for converting food into usable energy. It helps maintain stable blood sugar by slowing the absorption of carbohydrates at meals. And it provides the raw material to repair tissues throughout the body, including during sleep. When protein intake drops below what the body needs, it cannot fully complete these processes. Energy production becomes less efficient, and the result is that low-grade, persistent tiredness that feels different from ordinary sleepiness, a heaviness, a drag, a sense of running on something less than a full tank. If this sounds familiar, it is worth asking whether your protein intake is actually where it needs to be, not just in total, but spread throughout the day. Research increasingly supports distributing protein across meals rather than concentrating it in one sitting. Aiming for around 25 to 30 grams per meal helps the body make the most of what it receives. The second sign is muscle loss you are starting to notice but cannot fully explain. Here is a number worth knowing. Muscle mass decreases roughly 3 to 8% per decade after age 30. That rate accelerates after 60. A study in nutrition and metabolism confirmed that by age 80, a person who has not been proactive may have lost 30% or more of the muscle mass they had in their younger years. This condition, the progressive age-related loss of muscle mass and strength, is called sarcopenia, and it is not rare. Research suggests it affects somewhere between 10 and 20% of older adults, and the numbers rise steeply with age. Now, muscle loss happens for multiple reasons. Reduced physical activity is one, hormonal changes are another, but protein intake is a central factor. Muscle is built and maintained through a process called muscle protein synthesis, the body's mechanism for creating new muscle tissue. That process requires adequate dietary protein. Without it, the body cannot keep up with the natural rate of muscle breakdown that occurs with aging. You end up in a deficit, and the muscles gradually shrink. The practical signs of this are things like trousers that fit differently than they used to, a grip that feels weaker, carrying groceries that feel heavier than they should, or noticing that activities you used to do without thinking now take noticeably more effort. These are not just signs of aging. They are signs that your muscles are not getting the support they need. The third sign is that you seem to get sick more often, or that illnesses linger longer than they used to. Your immune system is powered by proteins. Antibodies, the molecules your immune system uses to identify and neutralize viruses, bacteria, and other threats, are proteins. So are many of the white blood cells and signaling molecules that coordinate your body's defense response. When dietary protein is insufficient, the immune system loses some of its raw material. Production of antibodies slows. The speed and strength of the immune response decreases. What this looks like in daily life is getting colds or respiratory infections more frequently than the people around you. It looks like taking longer to recover when you do get sick. A cold that most people shake in 5 days lingers for 10. A minor infection that should clear up on its own requires medical attention. These are not always dramatic events, but the pattern, getting sick more, staying sick longer, is a signal worth paying attention to. After 60, immune function naturally becomes less robust. That makes adequate protein intake even more important, not less, because the immune system is working with fewer reserves even under ideal conditions. Shortchanging it on protein compounds that vulnerability. The fourth sign is that cuts, bruises, or wounds seem to take longer to heal than they should. Wound healing is a process that depends heavily on protein at every stage. When you have a cut or a bruise, the body immediately begins organizing a repair response. It recruits cells, builds new tissue, synthesizes collagen to close and strengthen the wound, and fights off potential infection. Collagen itself is a protein. It is the structural foundation of skin, connective tissue, and the walls of blood vessels. Without adequate dietary protein, collagen production slows, cell replication slows, and the entire healing process stretches out. You may not notice this dramatically. It shows up as a bruise that takes 2 weeks to fade instead of 1. A small cut that is still visible long after you would have expected it to close. a scrape that seems to linger, skin that seems less resilient, less quick to bounce back from minor damage. Researchers have confirmed that depleted protein levels are associated with increased risk of developing chronic wound issues and delayed recovery from injuries. This is worth paying attention to, particularly as we age, because skin and connective tissue naturally become less efficient over time. Adequate protein helps maintain the repair capacity that keeps you resilient. The fifth sign is increased hunger and cravings that seem difficult to control. This one surprises people. You might expect that eating less protein would make you less hungry, not more, but the biology works in the opposite direction. Protein is the most satiating of the three macronutrients. It activates hunger-suppressing hormones and slows gastric emptying, meaning it keeps you feeling full longer than the same number of calories from carbohydrates or fat. When your protein intake is low, those satiety signals are weaker. The result is that you feel hungry again sooner after meals. You find yourself reaching for snacks, often carbohydrate-heavy ones, in the mid-afternoon. You notice cravings for foods that are easy and quick to eat, but do not satisfy for long. The appetite does not feel quite controlled, and for many people, this translates over time into gradual weight gain or difficulty maintaining a healthy weight, which in turn creates its own health complications. There is also something specific happening with older adults here. Appetite naturally decreases somewhat with age, which can make it harder to eat the volume of food needed to meet protein targets. If the appetite you do have is being used up on lower protein foods, the deficit grows. Paying attention to whether the foods you are drawn to are actually meeting your protein needs is a more useful habit than simply trying to eat less. The sixth sign is thinning hair and brittle nails. Hair is made primarily of a protein called keratin. Nails are made of keratin too. Both require a steady supply of dietary protein to grow and maintain their structure. When protein intake drops, the body makes a practical decision. It prioritizes the internal organs, the immune system, the muscles, and other critical systems over cosmetic structures like hair and nails. Hair growth slows. The hair shaft becomes thinner and more fragile. More hair enters a resting phase and falls out, a condition called telogen effluvium, which research has linked to nutritional deficiencies, including inadequate protein. Nails show similar signs. They break more easily, they become ridged or peel in layers, they may grow more slowly than they used to. These are not vanity concerns. They are visible indicators of what is happening at a nutritional level throughout the body. If you are experiencing noticeable changes in hair thickness or nail strength that you cannot attribute to other causes, it is worth considering whether protein is part of the picture. It is also worth noting that collagen, which is derived from protein, plays a role in skin elasticity and structure. Some of the skin changes people associate with aging, including dryness, loss of firmness, and slower healing, are also connected to collagen production, which depends on adequate protein intake. The seventh sign is mood changes, increased irritability, or a sense of mental fog. This one catches people off guard because we do not often think of protein in connection with mood or mental clarity. But the connection is real and well established. Several of the neurotransmitters that regulate mood, including serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, are synthesized from amino acids which come from dietary protein. Tryptophan, for example, is an essential amino acid that serves as the precursor to serotonin, the neurotransmitter most closely associated with feelings of calm and well-being. Tyrosine is a precursor to dopamine and norepinephrine, which affect motivation, focus, and emotional regulation. When protein intake is insufficient, the amino acid supply for neurotransmitter production becomes limited. The brain's chemical balance can shift. People report feeling more irritable than usual, more anxious, less able to concentrate. A kind of mental slowness or brain fog settles in. Decision-making feels harder. Motivation dips. Enjoyment of activities that used to feel easy becomes a bit muted. These symptoms overlap with many other conditions, which is why they are easy to dismiss or attribute to stress, poor sleep, or simply getting older. But if you are noticing a persistent shift in your mood or mental sharpness that does not have an obvious cause, protein intake is one of the factors worth examining. The eighth sign is swelling, particularly in the legs, feet, or abdomen. This sign is less commonly discussed, but it is one that medical professionals take seriously. It is called edema, the accumulation of fluid in the body's tissues, and one of the drivers of edema is low levels of a blood protein called albumin. Here's how it works. Albumin is the most abundant protein in your blood. One of its key jobs is to maintain what is called oncotic pressure, the force that keeps fluid inside your blood vessels rather than leaking out into surrounding tissue. When dietary protein intake is chronically low, blood albumin levels can fall. When albumin falls, that pressure weakens. Fluid begins to leak out of the blood vessels and accumulate in the surrounding tissues, especially in the lower legs and feet, where gravity makes the pooling most noticeable. This is not the kind of swelling that appears dramatically overnight. It tends to develop gradually. Ankles that seem puffier in the evenings, shoes that feel tighter than they used to, a heaviness in the lower legs at the end of the day. If you notice these signs, it is important to discuss them with a doctor because edema can have multiple causes. But low protein intake is one of them, and it is often overlooked in the initial assessment. Now we arrive at the ninth sign, the one I mentioned at the beginning, the one that is most consistently mistaken for ordinary aging. That sign is a gradual decline in strength and physical function, specifically the kind that shows up in small, everyday ways. Not dramatic muscle failure, not sudden weakness, but a quiet, creeping reduction in what you are able to do comfortably. The stairs feel like slightly more effort. Rising from a low chair requires a little more push. Carrying something heavy across the room is fine, but the arms feel the effort afterward. Grip strength, which researchers use as a reliable marker of overall muscle function and even longevity, quietly decreases. Balance feels just a little less solid than it used to. Most men notice this and file it away as aging. They do not think of it as a nutritional problem. They think of it as biology doing what biology does. But here is what the research actually says. A major pooled analysis of 4 large longitudinal aging studies found that higher protein intake was modestly protective against the decline in walking speed and physical function over time. A 2025 study published in Frontiers in Nutrition confirmed that moderately increasing protein intake in older adults with sarcopenia produced significant improvements in muscle mass composition. Researchers from Stanford's lifestyle medicine program put it plainly. Protein is your daily muscle maintenance tool. The reason this sign is so important is that the consequences extend far beyond inconvenience. Declining functional strength is the direct precursor to falls, which are one of the leading causes of serious injury and loss of independence in older adults. Maintaining the strength and balance to move through the world safely is not a minor concern. It is central to how long you live independently and how well you live at all. And unlike many aspects of aging, this is one where a consistent, modest change in diet can produce measurable, real-world results. So what do you do with all of this? The first step is simply to take stock honestly. Think about what you ate yesterday, at every meal, every snack. How much of it was actually protein? Eggs, lean meat, fish, poultry, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds. These are the foods that move the needle. If most of your meals are built around bread, pasta, rice, vegetables, or fruit, there is a good chance you are falling short. The math is not complicated. A 175-pound man aiming for 1.0 grams per kilogram of body weight needs around 80 grams of protein per day. 3 eggs at breakfast gives you about 18 grams. A 4-ounce serving of chicken at lunch gives you around 35 grams. A cup of Greek yogurt in the afternoon gives you another 15 to 20 grams. You can get there, but it requires some intention. Spreading that intake across the day matters too. Research supports aiming for 25 to 30 grams of protein at each meal rather than concentrating it all in one place. The body can only use so much protein for muscle synthesis at any one sitting, and regular dosing throughout the day keeps that process running consistently. One practical note worth emphasizing: if you have kidney disease or any other condition that affects how your body processes protein, talk to your doctor before making significant changes to your intake. The guidance above is for generally healthy older adults. Your specific situation may call for different numbers, and medical guidance matters here. For most people, though, the practical changes are simpler than they expect. Add an egg or two to breakfast. Build meals around a protein source rather than treating protein as a side note. Keep Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, or a small handful of nuts accessible for between-meal hunger. These are not dramatic overhauls. They are small, consistent shifts that accumulate into meaningful change. Here is what I want you to take from everything we covered today. Fatigue that sleep does not fix. Gradual muscle loss. Frequent illness or slow recovery. Wounds that take longer to heal. Persistent hunger and cravings. Thinning hair and brittle nails. Mood changes and mental fog. Swelling in the lower legs or feet. And that quiet, creeping decline in everyday physical strength that almost everyone mistakes for normal aging. These are 9 signals your body may be sending you. They do not all mean the same thing, and any one of them could have multiple causes. But if several of them sound familiar, if you nodded along to more than 2 or 3, it is worth having an honest conversation with your doctor about whether your protein intake is where it needs to be. This is one of those areas where the research and the practical recommendation align cleanly. Older adults need more protein than the standard guidelines suggest. Most of us are not getting it, and the gap between where we are and where we need to be is not huge. It is often a matter of 2 or 3 intentional food choices per day. That is within reach for almost everyone watching this video. This is exactly the kind of practical, science-based information that Longevity Insight is built around. If this video gave you something useful to think about, I would ask you to do 2 things. First, share this with someone you care about, a friend, a brother, a neighbor, someone in your life who is over 60 and paying attention to their health. This information could genuinely help them. Second, leave a comment below. I want to hear from you. Which of these 9 signs surprised you most, or which one are you going to pay attention to going forward? Every comment gets read on this channel, and your response shapes what we cover next. And if you are not yet subscribed to Longevity Insight, this is your moment. Hit subscribe, and every week we will keep bringing you information you can actually use. Because aging well is not about luck. It is about knowing what to pay attention to and making the choices that keep your body strong and your life full.